Here we go. Here we go. All right. All right. We tapping in. Let me just double check everything. Top of the afternoon. Top of the afternoon to everybody joining me this afternoon. Uh-oh. Here we go. Here we go. There we go. I'm just making sure I'm tapped in on both my chats right now. All right, top of the afternoon, everybody. This is the New Era Young Lord Book Club, also known as the AfroTaino Book Club. Today, we are going over the Huey P. Newton Reader. If this is your first time here, I do believe in socialism, free education, free housing, and free healthcare. So by tapping the screen, sharing this live, it's just showing me a little bit of socialist love and support to be able to get the message out to the masses. And we can't forget the Young Lords Back the Borinquen Project. We will be in Yabucoa, Puerto Rico from October 5th to the 16th, I believe, right? Maybe I got that off, but yeah, the 6th to the 15th. There you go. But we will be in the Marco Sanchez Community Center, doing some community building. Marco Sanchez Community Center was a school that was taken over by the community because it was closed down due to lack of funds and resources by the government. So therefore the community has retaken over the community center to be able to allocate it for emergency purposes, community gatherings, and so on and so forth. So if you guys want to help support, all gifts, donations will be going to the Young Lords Back the Borinquen Project. And if you guys are on TikTok, because we're dual streaming on TikTok and YouTube right now, if you're on TikTok, the GoFundMe, the link is in the bio. So please do me a favor and go check that out. Without further ado, guys, the book that we're kicking off today is the Huey P. Newton Reader. Ooh, this is a good one. Diving straight into, his thoughts, his writings, his memoirs, some of the things that he had went through, which I think is important because especially when we're talking about the 60s and the revolutionary time, I don't think we focus too much on the individuals and what they were going through and the psychology and the psychological warfare that they were actually battling against. So we stay glorifying a lot of their ideologies and philosophies, which is good, right? But we also got to understand what dynamics created those situations for the individuals to have the thought of mind that they had, which is another whole deep dive into revolutionary concepts and ideologies and philosophies in its own. So let's tap the screen, share this live. Without further ado, let's get into the Huey P. Newton Reader. Salute to everybody. Again, we are on YouTube, so if you guys are on TikTok and you want to show me some love and support on YouTube, go hop over to YouTube. It is AfroTaino88, the same way on TikTok. And if you're on TikTok, and vice versa, if you're on YouTube, you want to go catch me on TikTok, AfroTaino over here too. But without further ado, let's get right back into the book. Well, let's start off the book.
The First Steps. Huey P. Newton was born the last of 7 children in Monroe, Louisiana in 1942. The family migrated 3 years later to Oakland, California, where his father served as a Baptist minister. Despite Huey's religious upbringing and close family ties, he was a troubled student, involved in petty criminal activity, and subject to constant expulsion from school throughout his adolescence. In part, this resulted from his being unable to read until age 16. Embarrassed by his illiteracy and determined to keep up with his older siblings' academic strides, he taught himself to read with the assistance of an older brother. By 1959, Huey had advanced himself to college-level comprehension, entering Oakland City College that same year. Here, he discovered the influential writings of W.E.B. Du Bois, Mao Zedong, and Malcolm X, which shaped his fledgling intellect. As his political consciousness became radicalized, Huey put his learning into action by taking part in Black student activism. Unfortunately, the many self-described campus radicals focused on student issues alone, neglecting the concerns of the Black community at large. Having grown up among poor African Americans, Huey understood that in spite of the newly granted legislative victories, Blacks still lacked equality under the law. The Voter Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act of 1965 were breakthroughs for African Americans, but did not create urgently needed jobs and other basic necessities, such as health care. Huey thus realized at this early point in his political development that only a liberation movement whose program addressed survival issues would bring about the revolutionary agenda he had begun to envision. Although campus organizing had been a disappointing experience, this work was nevertheless instrumental in bringing Huey together with classmate and future Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale. The following excerpts from Huey's autobiography, Revolutionary Suicide, chronicle this formative period, including the party's founding in 1966, its turbulent first year on the streets, Huey's historic encounter with Officer Frey, and the overnight rise of the Black Panthers to international prominence. Scoring. I first studied law to become a better burglar, figuring I might get busted at any time and wanting to be ready when it happened. I bought some books on criminal law and burglary and felony and looked up as much as possible. I tried to find out what kind of evidence they needed, what things were actually considered violations of the law, what the loopholes were, and what you could do to avoid being charged at all. They had a law for everything. I studied the California Penal Code and books like California Criminal Evidence and California Criminal Law by Frick and Allerkin, concentrating on those areas that were somewhat vague. The California Penal Code says that any law which is vague to the ordinary citizen, the average reasonable man who lives in California and who is exposed to the state's rules, regulations, and culture, does not qualify as a statute. Later on, law enforcement courses helped me to know how to deal with the police. Before I took criminal evidence in school, I had no idea what my rights really were. I did not know, for instance, that police can be arrested. My studying helped because every time I got arrested, I was released with no charge. Until I went to prison for something I was innocent of, I had no convictions against me. Yet I had done a little of everything. The court would convict you if it could, but if you knew the law and were articulate, then the judges figured you were not too bad because your very manner of speaking indicated that you had been indoctrinated into their way of thinking.
Listen.
I was doing a lot of things that were technically unlawful. Sometimes my friends and I received stolen blank checks from a company, which we would then make out for $150 to $200, never more than an amount consistent with a weekly paycheck. Sometimes we stole the checks ourselves. Other times we bought them from guys who had stolen them. You had to do this fast, before the companies distributed check numbers to banks and stores. We burglarized homes in the Oakland and Berkeley Hills in broad daylight. Sometimes we borrowed a pickup truck and put a lawnmower and garden tools in it. Then we drove up to a house that appeared empty and rang the bell. If no one answered, we rolled the lawnmower around to the back, as if we planned to cut the grass and trim the hedges. Then swiftly we broke into the house and took what we wanted. Often I went car prowling by myself. I would walk the streets until I saw a good prospect, then break into the car and take what was on the seat or in the glove compartment.
Really quick, if TikTok is acting up, don't forget we are live on YouTube. So if you guys want to switch over to YouTube to get a better quality and not have as much lagging, you guys are more than welcome to join me on YouTube. It is AfroTaino 88. So again, if the stream is acting up on this side, please do me a favor, hop onto YouTube and you'll be able to catch the stream and also recap it later on today just in case you missed anything.
Left their cars unlocked, which made it easier. We scored best, however, with the credit game or short change games. We stole or bought stolen credit cards and then purchased as much as possible with them before their numbers were distributed. You could either sell the booty or use it yourself. A very profitable credit game went like this. We would pay $20 or $30 to someone who owned a small business to say that we had worked for him 5 years or so. This established a work record good enough for credit in one of the big stores. Then we would charge about $150 worth of merchandise and pay $20 down. Of course, we used an assumed name and a phony address, but we let them check the address because we gave them a location and telephone number where one of our friends lived. We made payments for a couple of months. Then we would charge over the $150 limit. If you were making payments, they raised your credit. We would buy a big order and then stop making payments. If they called our place of work, they were told we had just quit. If they called our alleged address, they learned we had moved over a month ago. The store was left hanging. They did not really lose because they were actually robbing the community blind. They just wrote off the amount and continued their robbing. The lesson: you can survive through petty crime and hurt those who hurt you. Once into petty crime, I stopped fighting. I had transferred the conflict, the aggression, and hostility from the brothers in the community to the establishment. The most successful game I ran was the short change game. Shortchanging was an art I developed so well that I could make $50 to $60 a day. I ran it everywhere, in small and large stores, and even on bank tellers. In the short change game, I would go into a store with 5 $1 bills, ask the clerk for change, and walk out with a $10 bill. This was the 5 to 10 short change. You could also do a 10 to 20 short change by walking into the store with 10 $1 bills and coming out with a $20 bill. The $5 to $10 short change worked this way. You folded up 4 of the bills into a small, tight wad. Then you bought something like candy or gum with the other bill so that the clerk had to open the cash register to give you change.
For educational purposes only. This is for educational purposes only. Tap that screen, share this live. Salute to everybody on TikTok and YouTube showing me love and support. Salute.
I always stood a little distance from the register so that the clerk had to come to me to give me the change. You have to get the cash register open and get the clerk to move away from it so that his mind is taken off what he has in the register. When he brought my change from the candy, I handed him the wad of 4 $1 bills and said, "Here are 5 singles. Will you give me a $5 bill for them?" He would then hand me the $5 bill before he realized that there were only 4 singles in the wad. He has the register open, and I am prepared for him to discover the error. When he did, I would then hand him another single, but also the $5 bill he had given me, and say, "Well, here's 6 more. Give me a 10. He would do it, and I would take the $10 and be gone before he realized what had happened. Most of the time, they never understood. It happened so fast, they would simply go on to another customer. By the time things began to click in their minds, they could never be sure that something had in fact gone wrong until the end of the day when they tallied up the register. By that time, I was just a vague memory. Of course, if the clerk was quick and sensed that something was not right, then I pretended to be confused and would say I had made a mistake and give him the right amount. It was a pretty safe game, and it worked for me many times. The brother who introduced me to shortchanging eventually became a Muslim. But before that, he taught me to burglarize cars parked by the emergency entrances of hospitals. People would come to the hospital in a rush and leave their cars unlocked, with valuables in the open. I never scored on blacks under any condition, but scoring on whites was a strike against injustice.
Let's tap that screen, guys.
Whenever I had liberated enough cash to give me a stretch of free time, I stayed home reading books like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, The Devils, and The House of the Dead, The Trial by Franz Kafka, and Thomas Wolfe's Look Homeward Angel. I read and reread Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, the story of Jean Valjean, a Frenchman who spent 30 years in prison for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his hungry family. This really reached me because I identified with Valjean, and I often thought of my father being in a kind of social prison because he wanted to feed his family. Albert Camus' The Stranger and the Myth of Sisyphus made me feel even more justified in my pattern of liberating property from the oppressor as an antidote to social suicide. I felt that white people were criminals because they plundered the world. It was more, however, than a simple anti-white feeling, because I never wanted to hurt poor whites, even though I had met some in school who called me nigger and other names.
F1.
I fought them, but I never took their lunches or money because I knew that they had nothing to start with. With those who had money, it was a different story. I still equated having money with whiteness, and to take what was mine and what the white criminals called theirs gave me a feeling of real freedom. I even bragged to my friends how good I felt about the whole matter. When they were at my apartment during times when there wasn't any food to eat, I told them that even though I starved, my time was my own and I could do anything I wanted with it. I didn't have a car then, because most of my money was spent on the apartment, food, and clothes. When friends asked me why I did not get a car, I told them it was because I did not want bills and that a car was not my main goal or desire. My purpose was to have as much leisure time as possible. I could have pulled bigger jobs and gotten more, but I did not want any status symbols. I wanted most of all to be free from the life of a servant forced to take those low-paying jobs and looked at with scorn by white bosses. Eventually, I got caught, and more than once. But by the...
Really quick, I just want to acknowledge, you can't knock the hustle in a system that's not set up for you to succeed. You can't knock the decisions that they make to be able to just survive, especially with the climax of the environment that's been created due to the oppressive systematic issues that we occur to on a day-to-day basis. And again, like he said, he never out-hustled a person of color. He never did none of those things that would be able to hurt the community. He was directing and he was targeting all of his hustles towards individuals who either cause the circumstances and situation or who just only thing they do is extract from the community. So you can't knock the hustle. I'm just saying.
I had developed a fairly good working knowledge of the law, and I decided to defend myself. Although...
And that's what makes Huey one of the most dangerous revolutionaries we've ever seen, especially here in the United States, right? Because he actually used the system itself against itself to be able to make major changes in the community and make major changes in the system. And if you even see the level and the lengths they go to be able to renege on a lot of the systematic issues once it's weaponized and used to them, they no longer see it as a beneficial point in the system that'll be working on their benefits, so they're forced to change it. This is why I said knowledge and education is definitely key to success, especially when we know what we're doing, when we set in the proper foundation and we understand the different dynamics and situations we go through. You got to give it up to Huey. He's a smart individual.
Legal technician, I could make a good defense. If you are an existentialist, defending yourself is another manifestation of freedom. When you are brought into the courts of the establishment, you can show your contempt for them. Most defendants want to get high-priced counsel or use the state to speak for them through the public defender. If you speak for yourself, you can say exactly what you want, or at least not say what you do not want to. Or you can laugh at them. As Elaine Brown, a member of the Black Panther Party, says in her song, The End of Silence, you laugh at laws passed by a silly lot that tell you to give thanks for what you've already got. The laws exist to defend those who possess property. They protect the possessors who should share, but who do not. By defending myself, I showed my contempt for that structure. It gave me real pleasure to defend myself. I never thought in terms of conviction or acquittal, although it was an added treat to escape their net. But even a conviction would not have dismayed me, because at least I had the opportunity to laugh at them and show my contempt. They would see that I was not intimidated enough to raise the money to get counsel, money that I did not have in the first place, or to accept a public defender. I especially liked traffic violations. For a while, I paid a lot of traffic tickets. When I became my own defender, I never paid another one. Of the 3 major cases in which I defended myself, the only one I lost was the one in which I was innocent. Once, I was indicted on 16 counts of burglary through trickery as a result of the shortchange game. And I beat the cases during the pre-trial period because the police could not establish the corpus delicti, or the elements of the case. Each law had a body of elements, and each element has to be violated in order for a crime to have been committed. That's what they call the corpus delicti. People think that term means the physical body, but it really means the body of elements. For example, according to California law, in order to commit armed robbery, you have to be armed, and you must expropriate through fear or force related to weapons. You can have armed robbery without any bullets in the gun. The elements of the case relate to fear and force in connection with weapons.
Listen.
In the short change, or bunco case, I was accused of running my game in 16 stores. However, they could get only a few people to say they were short in their registers.
Why?
I was really saved from being convicted because the police tried to get a young woman teller from a bank to say that I had shortchanged her. A lot of people will not admit they have been shortchanged. In the pretrial, in which they were trying to get a federal case, they asked me whether I had gone into the bank. I refused to admit it. I knew that the young woman whom they'd wanted to testify against me had not shown up at court. When I bailed out, I went to her bank and asked her if the police had been there. She said they had, and that they were trying to persuade her that I had shortchanged her. She said she would not testify because she knew it had not happened. I invited her to court to testify on my behalf. She came and explained to the judge that the police had tried to persuade her to testify, but she would not comply. My argument was that the police had invented the shortchange rap against me. I pointed out that clerks who were shortchanged would have missed the money either when I was in the store or at the end of the day. None of these people had notified the police. The police had sought them out, and by suggesting that they had been shortchanged, were really offering the clerks a chance to make $5 or $10 extra, a sort of payoff for testifying. Most people, I said, are not as honest as the young girl bank teller. Another argument I put forth in my defense was that if someone else had gotten change after I had been in the store before inventory of the register, it was quite possible, even probable, that the money had been lost at some other time. I got a dismissal on the grounds of insufficient evidence. In the second major case, I was accused of having stolen some books from a store near the school, and of having burglarized the car of another student and taken his books. He reported to the bookstore that his books had been stolen. They were on the lookout for books with the marking he had described. I had not stolen the books, even though they were in my possession. I was doing a lot of gambling at the time, and some students who owed me money gave me the books instead. We used the books for money because if a book was required in a course, we could sell it to the bookstore.
Right.
Even though I did not know where the books came from, I suspected that they were stolen. I figured there was about $60 worth of books in the stack. When I needed money, I sent my cousin to the bookstore to cash them in. The bookstore took them away from her, claiming that they were stolen. They would not give her any money, nor would they return the books.
Listen.
I went down to the store and told them they could not confiscate my books without due process of law. They knew I was a student at the college and that they could call the police on me anytime they wanted.
Listen.
I told them that either they return the books right then, or I would take as many books as I thought would equal the amount they had stolen from me. They gave me the books, and I went on to class. Apparently, the bookstore notified the dean of students, who called the police. While I was in class, the Oakland police came and escorted me with the books to the campus police, who took me to the dean's office. No one could arrest me because there was no warrant. The bookstore wanted to wait until the man who had reported the books stolen returned from the army to identify them. So they took me to the dean's office, and the dean said he would give me a receipt, keeping the books until the owner came back. I told him that he would not give me a receipt because they were my books, and he could not confiscate my property without due process of law. To do so would be a violation of my constitutional rights. I added, furthermore, if you try to confiscate my property, I will ask the police over there to have you arrested. The police stood looking stupid, not knowing what to do. The dean said the man would not be back for about a week, but he wanted the books. I took the books off his desk and said, I'm enrolled here, and when you want to talk to me, I'll be around. Then I walked out of the office. They did not know how to deal with a poor, oppressed black man who knew their law and had dignity.
Really quick, guys, salute to everybody. Thank you for all the gifts. Don't forget, we are also live on YouTube. So if you missed some of the content or you can't stay fully through and you want to be able to catch it on later, just remember you can always look up the YouTube AfroTaino 88 and you can recap all of the books that we gone over. We already finished War Against All Puerto Ricans, which was the last segment, and now we're on the Huey P reader. So do me a favor, tap that screen, share this live on both platforms, and like I said, if you guys could shoot over to YouTube and shoot me a subscribe, I really appreciate all the love and support. And if you hit the notification bells on both platforms, every time I go live, it should notify you that we active. So salute to everybody. Like I said, this is like the classroom. So treat it as such, positive, productive. Keep the comments place very safe. Let's keep it going.
When I was charged and brought to trial, I defended myself again. The case revolved around identifying the books.
Listen.
The man knew that his books had been stolen. The bookstore knew they had lost some books. Identification had not been made, but I was charged with a theft. I had stashed the books away so that nobody could locate them, and when I came to court, I left them behind. They brought me to trial without any factual evidence against me, and I beat the case with the defense I conducted, particularly my cross-examination. The woman who owned the bookstore took the stand. The previous year, on Christmas Eve, she had invited me to her home, and I had seen her off and on after that. When I was unwilling to continue a relationship with her, she became angry. I wanted to bring this out, but when I began this line of questioning, the judge was outraged and stopped it. By this time, however, she had broken down in tears on the stand, and it was apparent to the jury by the questions I asked and her reaction to them that she had personal reasons for testifying against me. When the dean testified, I really went to work. Although no books were entered into evidence, he said that I had in my possession some books identical to those on the list the day the police brought me to his office. I asked him, "Well, if the police were right there, why didn't you put me under arrest?" He said, "I wasn't sure of my rights." This was the opening I needed. I said, "You mean to say that I attend your school and you're teaching me my rights without even knowing your own? You're giving me knowledge and you don't know your basic civil rights?" Then I turned to the jury and argued that this was strange indeed. The judge was furious and almost cited me for contempt of court. I was in contempt, all right, and not only of the court. I was contemptuous of the whole system of exploitation, which I was coming to understand better and better. I knew what the jury was thinking, and when the dean said that he did not know his rights, I used his ignorance to my advantage. People automatically think, "You mean you're a college professor and you don't know something that basic and simple?" Once I planted this idea in the minds of the jurors, it completely negated the dean's testimony. I told the jury that I collected books, which I did, traded, and sold them, and that I had some volumes similar to those named in the indictment, same names, authors, and so forth. When they wanted to view the books, I asked the judge if I could go home and get them. The judge said that he could not stop a trial in the middle, it was a misdemeanor case, to let me go home. My strategy worked, however, and I ended up with a hung jury. Then came the second trial. This time, I had the books in court, but nobody could identify them. I had acquired some different books, same authors and same names, and put some similar markings in them. The man who claimed his car had been burglarized, the dean, and the owner of the store could not positively identify them. They kept saying that the books were either similar or the same, but they were not sure. I emphasized this uncertainty, saying that all I knew was I had purchased the books from another person. I told the jury that I had not in fact stolen the books, and that by bringing them to court, I was trying to find out if they belonged to those who had brought the charges. I got another hung jury. They tried me a third time with the same result. When they brought the case up a fourth time, the judge dismissed it.
Listen.
Off and on, With continuances and mistrials, the case dragged over a period of 9 months. It was simple harassment as far as I was concerned, because I had not stolen the books. They might also have been trying to test new prosecutors. I had a different one every time, every chump in Alameda County, and still they got nowhere. I looked them straight in the eye and advanced. The third case came out of a party I attended with Melvin at the home of a probation officer who had gone to San Jose State College with him. Melvin had known some of the people at the party quite a while, and most of them were related to each other in some way, either by blood or by marriage. Melvin and I were outsiders. As usual, I started a discussion. A party was good or bad for me, depending on whether I could start a rap session. I taught that way for the Afro-American Association and recruited a lot of the lump-ins. Some of these sessions ended in fights. It was almost like the dozens again, although here ideas, not mothers, were at issue. The guy who could ask the most penetrating questions and give the smartest answers capped or topped all the others. Sometimes after a guy was defeated or shot down, if he wanted to fight, I would accommodate him. It was all the same. If I could get into a good rap and a good fight too, the night was complete. At the party, while we were talking, someone called Odell Lee came up and entered the conversation. I did not know him, had only seen him dancing earlier in the evening, but I had gone to school with his wife, Margot, who was there. Odell Lee walked up and said, "You must be an Afro-American." I replied, "I don't know what you mean. Are you asking me if I am of African descent? Or are you asking me if I'm a member of Donald Warden's Afro-American Association? If the latter, then I am not. But if you're asking me if I'm of African ancestry, then I am an Afro-American, just as you are." He said some words in Chinese, and I came back in Swahili. Then he asked me, "Well, how do you know that I'm an Afro-American?" I replied, "Well, I have 20/20 vision, and I can see your hair is just as kinky as mine, and your face just as black. So I conclude that you must be exactly what I am, an Afro-American." Saying that, I turned my back and began to cut my steak. I was the only one in the room with a steak knife. All the others had plastic utensils, but since the steak was kind of tough, I had gone into the kitchen for a regular steak knife. Having made my point, my move, so to speak, I turned my back on Lee in a kind of put down. To him, it was a provocative act. Odell had a scar on his face from about the ear to just below his chin. This was a very significant point, because on the block, you run into plenty of guys with scars like that, which usually means that the person has seen a lot of action with knives. This is not always the case, but when you are trying to survive on the block, you learn to be hip to the cues. So I turned my back and began cutting steak with the knife I had in my right hand. He grabbed my left arm with his right hand and turned me around abruptly. When he did, my knife was pointed right at him in ready position. Lee said, "Don't turn your back on me when I'm talking to you." I pushed his hand off my arm. "Don't you ever put your hands on me again," I said, and turned around once more to my steak. Ordinarily, I would not have turned my back a second time because he had all the signs of a tush hog. But somehow the conditions did not add up. Most people there were professionals, or training to become professionals, and this man with the scar did not seem to fit. We were not on the block, so I thought perhaps the scar meant nothing. All of a sudden, however, he was acting like a bully, and now he wanted everyone to know he was not finished with me. When I turned my back on him a second time, this would have ended the whole argument for the black bourgeoisie, but the tush hog responded in his way. He turned me around again, and the tempo picked up. "You must not know who you're talking to," he said, moving his left hand to his left hip pocket. I figured I had better hurry up. Since the best defense is a good offense, my steak knife was again in a ready position instinctively. I said to him, "Don't draw a knife on me," and I thrust my knife forward, stabbing him several times before he could come up with his left hand.
F1 in the comments. F1 in the comments. Let's protect this live. Tap the screen and share this live. Again, F1 in the comments. Again, this is for educational purposes only. We're not promoting any violence or any things like that. This is for educational purposes only. So do me a favor, guys. Let's protect the live. Tap the screen and share this.
He held on to me with his right hand and tried to advance, but I pushed him away. I still do not know what he was doing with his left, but I was expecting to be hurt any time and determined to beat him to the punch. Melvin grabbed Lee's right arm and pushed him into a corner, where he fell, bleeding heavily. He got up and charged me again, and I continued to hold my knife ready. Then Melvin jumped between us, and Lee fainted in his arms. As Melvin took the knife from me, we turned to the rest of the people and somebody asked, "Why did you cut him?" Melvin said, "He cut him because he should have cut him," and we backed out of the room. Melvin wanted me to press charges against the man, but I would never go to the police.
Really quick, yes or no? Was he wrong for his actions? Yes or no in the comments? Yes, that he was wrong for doing what he did. No, he was not. Yes, he was wrong. No, he was not. Please, let me see what y'all opinions is in the comment. Was he wrong?
About 2 weeks later, Odell Lee swore out charges against me. I don't know why he delayed so long, perhaps because he was in the hospital for a few days. Maybe he was hesitant. He had been talking about getting me, I know, but I also heard that his wife had urged him to press charges instead. To me, he was not the kind of character who would go to the police. I saw him as a guy who would rather look for me himself and deal right there. When he sent word that he was after me, I started packing a gun.
F1.
Instead, I was arrested at my house on a warrant and indicted for assault with a deadly weapon. After I pleaded not guilty, it went to a jury trial. I defended myself again. I was found guilty as charged, but only because I lacked a jury of my peers.
Listen up.
My defense was based on the grounds that I was not guilty, either by white law or by the culture of the black community. I did not deny that I stabbed Odell Lee. I admitted it. But the law says that when one sees or feels he is in imminent danger of great bodily harm or death, he may use whatever force necessary to defend himself. If he kills his assailant, the homicide is justified. This section of the California Penal Code is almost impossible for a man to defend himself under unless he is a part of the oppressor class.
Listen up.
The oppressed have no chance, for people who sit on juries always think you could have picked another means of defense. They cannot see or understand the danger. A jury of my peers would have understood the situation and exonerated me, but the jurors in Alameda County came out of big houses in the hills to pass judgment on the people whom they feel threaten their peace. When these people see a scar on the face of a man on the block, they have no understanding of its symbolism. Odell Lee got on the stand and said that his scar resulted from an automobile accident. It may well have, but taking everything in context, his behavior at the party, the move toward his left hip and his scar, my peers would never have convicted me. Bobby Seale explains it brilliantly in Seize the Time. You may go to a party and step on someone's shoes and apologize, and if the person accepts the apology, then nothing happens. If you hear something like, "An apology won't shine my shoes," then you know he is really saying, "I'm going to fight you." So you defend yourself, and in that case, striking first would be a defensive act, not an offensive one. You are trying to get an advantage over an opponent who has already declared war. It is all a matter of lifestyles that spills over into the problem of getting a jury of one's peers. If a truck driver is the defendant, should there be only truck drivers on the jury, or all white racists on the jury if a white racist is on trial? I say no. There is, nevertheless, an internal contradiction in a jury system that totally divides the accused and his jury.
Listen.
Different cultures and lifestyles in America use the same words with different shades of meaning. All belong to one society yet live in different worlds. I was found guilty of a felony, assault with a deadly weapon, and faced a long jail sentence for the first time. Before and during the trial, I had been out on bail for several months. I came to court each time I was supposed to, but when I was convicted, the judge decided to revoke my bail immediately and place me in the custody of the bailiff while he considered what sentence to impose. Wanting none of this, I demanded to be sentenced right then. The judge said that if he sentenced me then, I would be sent to the state penitentiary. I told him to send me there immediately so that I could start serving my time. He refused, asking me, "Do you realize what you're saying?" I said, "I know what I'm saying, that you found me guilty. But I am not guilty, and now I don't want to wait around a month serving dead time while you think about it." No time was dead to me.
Listen up.
It was all live time.
Listen up.
I felt that if the judge wanted to think about it for 30 days, he should let me stay out on bail while he did so. But he would not. He had me confined to the Alameda County Jail, a place I would get to know well. Very well. While I was waiting, my family hired a lawyer to represent me at the sentencing. The judge was a man named Leonard Dighton, who did not give lawyers, much less defendants, any respect. He has sent so many people to the penitentiary that a section of San Quentin is called Dighton's Row. I was against my family hiring a lawyer because I felt it was useless. Nevertheless, they did, and he charged them $1,500 to go to court one time. When I arrived for sentencing, he was there, and he worked his white magic. The judge sentenced me to 6 months in the county jail. Even though I had been convicted of a felony, the time they gave me was for a misdemeanor. This was to become a critical issue in my later capital trial, because the law says you can reduce a felony to a misdemeanor by serving less time. The penalty for a felony is no less than a year in the state penitentiary and no more than a life sentence or death. For a misdemeanor, the maximum is 1 year in the county jail.
Whoo, that was a good first chapter. Salute to everybody tapping in on TikTok and YouTube. For everybody on TikTok, you can go catch the archive video. You can go tap in right now. We are live on YouTube at AfroTaino 88. So if you guys want to recap any of the books or any of the lives that we do here on my platform, you can be able to catch it later on when you have a little bit more time to listen and tune in. Don't forget to tap the screen, share this live, and don't forget, guys, all gifts and donation is going to the Young Lords Back to Borinquen project. We will be in Yabucoa, Puerto Rico from October 6th to the 15th at the Marco Sanchez Community Center. So if you guys want to help, donate, share the GoFundMe, the link is in the bio on TikTok. So please, if you guys want to help and support a good cause or even want to participate, reach out, link up. Let's get back to the book though. Salute.
Freedom. Jail is an odd place to find freedom. But that was the place I first found mine, in the Alameda County Jail in Oakland in 1964. This jail is located on the 10th floor of the Alameda County Courthouse, the huge white building we call Moby Dick. When I was falsely convicted of the assault against Odell Lee, Judge Dighton sent me there to await sentencing. Shortly after I arrived, I was made a trustee, which gave me an opportunity to move about freely. Conditions were not good. In fact, the place blew up a few weeks later when the inmates refused to go on eating starches and split pea soup at almost every meal and went on a food strike. I joined them. When we were brought our split pea soup, we hurled it back through the bars, all over the walls, and refused to lock up in our cells. I was the only trustee who took part in the strike, and because I could move between cell blocks, they charged me with organizing it. True, I had carried a few messages back and forth, but I was not an organizer then. Not that it mattered to the jail administration. Trustees were supposed to go along with the establishment in everything, and since I could not do that, I was slapped with the organizing label and put in the hole, what black prisoners called the soul breaker. I was 22 years old, and I had been in jail before on various beefs, mostly burglary and petty larceny. My parents were pretty sick of me in my late teens and the years following, so I had to depend on Sonny Man to come up from Los Angeles, or wherever he was, to bail me out. Since I had been given to him, he came whenever he could. But sometimes I could not find him. At any rate, I was no stranger to jail by 1964, although I had never been in extreme solitary confinement. Within jail, there are 4 levels of confinement: the main line, segregation, isolation, and solitary, the soul breaker. You can be in jail, but the soul breaker is your last end of the world. In 1964, there were 2 of these deprivation cells at the Alameda County Courthouse. Each was 4.5 feet wide by 6 feet long by 10 feet high. The floor was dark red rubber tile and the walls were black. If the guards wanted to, they could turn on a light in the ceiling, but I was always kept in the dark and nude. That is part of the deprivation, why the soul breaker is called a strip cell. Sometimes the prisoner in the other cell would get a blanket, but they never gave me one. He sometimes got toilet paper too. The limit was 2 squares, and when he begged for more, he was told no. That is part of the punishment. There was no bunk, no wash bin, no toilet, nothing but bare floors, bare walls, a solid steel door, and a round hole 4 inches in diameter and 6 inches deep in the middle of the floor. The prisoner was supposed to urinate and defecate in this hole. A half-gallon milk carton filled with water was my liquid for the week. Twice a day, and always at night, the guards brought a little cup of cold split pea soup right out of the can. Sometimes during the day, they brought fruit loaf, a patty of cooked vegetables mashed together into a little ball. When I first went in there, I wanted to eat and stay healthy. But soon I realized that was another trick, because when I ate, I had to defecate. At night, no light came in under the door. I could not even find the hole if I had wanted to. If I was desperate, I had to search with my hand. When I found it, the hole was always slimy with the filth that had gone in before. I was just like a mole looking for the sun. I hated finding it when I did. After a few days, the hole filled up and overflowed, so that I could not lie down without wallowing in my own waste. Once every week or 2, the guard ran a hose into the cell and washed out the urine and defecation. This cleared the air for a while and made it all right to take a deep breath. I had been told I would break before the 15 days were up. Most men did. After 2 or 3 days, they would begin to scream and beg for someone to come and take them out, and the captain would pay a visit and say, "We don't want to treat you this way. Just come out now and abide by the rules and don't be so arrogant. We'll treat you fairly. The doors here are large." To tell the truth, after 2 or 3 days, I was in bad shape. Why I did not break, I do not know. Stubbornness, probably. I did not want to beg. Certainly, my resistance was not connected to any kind of ideology or program. That came later. Anyway, I did not scream and beg. I learned the secrets of survival. One secret was the same that Mahatma Gandhi learned: to take little sips of nourishment, just enough to keep up one's strength, but never enough to have to defecate until the 15 days were up. That way I kept the air somewhat clean and did not have the overflow. I did the same with the water, taking little sips every few hours. My body absorbed all of it, and I did not have to urinate. There was another, more important secret, one that took longer to learn. During the day, a little light showed in the 2-inch crack at the bottom of the steel door. At night, as the sun went down and the lights clicked off one by one, I heard all the cells closing and all the locks. I held my hands up in front of my face, and soon I could not see them. For me, that was the testing time, the time when I had to save myself or break. Outside the jail, the brain is always being bombarded by external stimuli. These ordinary sights and sounds of life help to keep our mental processes in order, rational. In deprivation, you have to somehow replace the stimuli, provide an interior environment for yourself. Ever since I was a little boy, I have been able to overcome stress by calling up pleasant thoughts. So very soon, I began to reflect on the most soothing parts of my past. Not to keep out any evil thoughts, but to reinforce myself in some kind of rewarding experience. Here I learned something. This was different. When I had a pleasant memory, what was I to do with it? Should I throw it out and get another, or try to keep it to entertain myself as long as possible? If you are not disciplined, a strange thing happens. The pleasant thought comes, and then another and another, like quick cuts, flashing vividly across a movie screen. At first, they are organized. Then they start to pick up speed, pushing in on top of one another, going faster, 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 faster. The pleasant thoughts are not so pleasant now. They are horrible and grotesque caricatures, whirling around in your head. Stop, I heard myself say. Stop, stop, stop. I did not scream. I was able to stop them. Now what do? I started to exercise, especially when I heard the jangle of keys as the guards came with the split pea soup and fruit loaf. I would not scream. I would not apologize, even though they came every day, saying they would let me out if I gave in. When they were coming, I would get up and start my calisthenics. And when they went away, I would start the pleasant thoughts again. If I was too tired to stand, I would lie down and find myself on my back. Later, I learned that my position, with my back arched and only my shoulders and tight buttocks touching the floor, was a Zen Buddhist posture. I did not know it then, of course. I just found myself on my back. When the thoughts started coming again to entertain me, and when the same thing happened with the speed up, faster, faster, I would say stop and start again. Over a span of time, I do not know how long it took, I mastered my thoughts. I could start them and stop them. I could slow them down and speed them up. It was a very conscious exercise. For a while, I feared I would lose control. I could not think. I could not stop thinking. Only later did I learn through practice to go at the speed I wanted. I call them film clips, but they are really thought patterns. The most vivid pictures of my family, girls, good times.
Yo, I just want to highlight the psychological strength you have to be able to be in those situations and circumstances, to be able to have control over your thoughts and your emotions without fully breaking down. Majority of individuals that go into the prison system, doesn't matter how'd you get there, under these conditions, psychologically, it is meant to break an individual down. No matter what background you come from, it does not matter. The conditions, the system, the dynamics, like I said, these are the things that literally psychologically fuck with our mind when we don't realize it. Hearing his aspect of it, it makes it sound so simple that a lot of us be like, yeah, that would be me. Yeah, I would be able to overcome a lot of these things until you're actually in that situation and understand how strong-minded you have to be and how psychologically advanced to be able to see these tools, to be able to navigate. It is difficult. It is not something that you can just like this. I don't think the average individual can do it like this. If it was, then they wouldn't use it as a tactic to be able to control the population in the prison system. Right or wrong?
I could lie with my back arched for hours on end, and I placed no importance on the passage of time. Control. I learned to control my food, my body, and my mind through a deliberate act of will. After 15 days, the guards pulled me out and sent me back to a regular cell for 24 hours.
A lot of us can't even control ourselves when having basic conversations or debates or disagreements with our peers. So imagine being in such harsh conditions. Like, do you really think a lot of us would have that self-control to realize what we're going through, how we're going through, and how to navigate through that? No. Do me a favor, go on social media for like a week or two and really engage and analyze with the TikTok crowds and stuff, and you can see, without engaging, just watch, and you can see how individuals attack one another. So when you're put under these such hard circumstances and conditions, do you really think you'll be able to withstand the psychological warfare that's been perfected to be able to be successful for the colonizer or the oppressor? Just gotta watch it. This is what I said, and there's no shade to anybody. A lot of us don't realize how much of the psyche goes into a lot of the oppression we go through, and a lot of that psyche manipulates us to be able to go against one another. It's the crabs in the barrel mentality, and it's because we've come from such harsh and fucked up conditions that we're just trying to get to the next step. And sometimes we don't realize how our actions and the things we say and do can be almost identical to how someone we deem as a colonizer can do. And again, it's not what you say, it's how you say something. And especially for people that come from such oppressed conditions and circumstances. Again, I'm not telling people they got to cater to people at all. But you got to understand, as colonized and oppressed people, no matter who colonized you or where you from or how you went through your shit, we've gone through it so much, so the moment someone is speaking us to on a frequency where we don't want to receive or we deem it being harmful to us, that puts us in that defensive mode, that comes through colonization. This is why I say it's not what you say sometimes, it's how you say things. My mother always told me that your biggest problem is not that you be wrong 95% of the time, it's how you say it and how you come across is what makes you wrong in majority of the times of your arguments, or when everybody's telling you, yo, you can't be doing it. And I'd be like, but no, it's because I have to realize it's not what I say, it's how I say it and to whom I'm saying it to. We're all very intelligent, but a lot of us forget about reading the room sometimes. But I went sidetracked. Let's get back to this. And TikTok is telling me to fill in this puzzle, or it's going to end my live. Hold on. There we go. But let's get back into the book, y'all.
Took a shower and saw a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. They were worried that prisoners would become mentally disorganized in such deprivation. Then, because I had not repented, they sent me back to the hole. By then, it held no fears for me. I had won my freedom. Soul breakers exist because the authorities know that such conditions would drive them to the breaking point. But when I resolved that they would not conquer my will, I became stronger than they were. I understood them better than they understood me. No longer dependent on the things of the world, I felt really free for the first time in my life. In the past, I had been like my jailers. I had pursued the goals of capitalistic America. Now, I had a higher freedom.
When he's speaking what he's speaking right now, yo, it just brings me back to when, listen, go read Elite Capture, How the World Stole Identity and Everything Else, Identity Politics and Everything Else. And if you could really understand elite capture and controlling a room, and how an elite can be almost any individual dependent on the circumstances, conditions, or your surrounding environment, you can understand what he's mastering or what he's not allowing the elites to be able to do and manipulate with him. This is why I say sometimes we have to acknowledge some of these tactics and tools that the oppressor's doing, so we can actually deflect it or train ourselves not to be able to submit or to be able to go into those state of minds that they're trying to force us into. We have to understand these different things, guys. It's not just a physical warfare. We're also battling a psychological warfare. And if you ask me, we go through more psychological warfare, especially in the United States, than anything. I'm just saying.
Most people who know me do not realize that I have been in and out of jail for the past 12 years. They know only of my 11 months in solitary in 1967. Waiting for the murder trial to begin, and the 22 months at the penal colony after that. But 1967 would not have been possible without 1964. I could not have handled the penal colony solitary without the soul breaker behind me. Therefore, I cannot tell inexperienced young comrades to go into jail and into solitary, that is the way to defy the authorities and exercise their freedom. I know what solitary can do to a man. The strip cell has been outlawed throughout the United States. Prisoners I talk to in California tell me it is no longer in use on the West Coast. That was the work of Charles Gary, the lawyer who defended me in 1968, when he fought the case of Warren Wells, a Black Panther accused of shooting a policeman. The Superior Court of California said it was an outrage to human decency to put any man through such extreme deprivation. Of course, prisons have their ways, and out there right now, somewhere, prisoners without lawyers are probably lying in their own filth in the sole.
Really quick, everybody on TikTok, we are also live on YouTube. So if you guys missed anything or you can't stick around for the full, or you prefer to go over there and listen on YouTube, the audio quality is a lot better. But we are live, and it's AfroTaino 88. And I'm going to step away because I got to grab something to eat really quick. But keep tapping the screen, keep sharing this live. I'll be in 2 minutes.
I was in the hole for a month. My sentence, when it came, was for 6 months on the county farm at Santa Rita, about 50 miles south of Oakland. This is an honor camp with no walls, and the inmates are not locked up. There is a barbed wire fence, but anyone can easily walk off during the daytime. The inmates work at tending livestock, harvesting crops, and doing other farm work. I was not in the honor camp long. A few days after I arrived, I had a fight with a fat black inmate named Bojack, who served in the mess hall. Bojack was a diligent enforcer of small helpings, and I was a dipper. Whenever Bojack turned away, I would dip for more with my spoon. One day he tried to prevent me from dipping, and I called him for protecting the oppressor's interests and smashed him with a steel tray. When they pulled me off him, I was hustled next door to Greystone, the maximum security prison at Santa Rita. Here, prisoners are locked up all day inside a stone building. Not only that, I was put in solitary confinement for the remaining months of my sentence. Because of my experience in the hole, I could survive. Still, I did not submit willingly. The food was as bad in Greystone as it had been in Alameda, and I constantly protested about that and the lack of heat in my cell. Half the time, we had no heat at all. Wherever you go in prison, there are disturbed inmates. One on my block at Santa Rita screamed night and day as loudly as he could. His vocal cords seemed made of iron. From time to time, the guards came into his cell and threw buckets of cold water on him. Gradually, as the inmate wore down, the scream became a croak, and then a squeak, and then a whisper. Long after he gave out, the sound lingered in my head. The Santa Rita administration finally got disgusted with my continual complaints and protests and shipped me back to the jail in Oakland, where I spent the rest of my time in solitary. By then, I was used to the cold. Even now, I do not like any heat at all wherever I stay, no matter what the outside temperature. Even so, the way I was treated told me a lot about those who devised such punishment. I know them well. Bobby Seale. Out of jail and back on the street in 1965, I again took up with Bobby Seale. We had a lot to talk about. I had not seen him in more than a year. Bobby and I had not always agreed. In fact, we disagreed the first time we met during the Cuban Missile Crisis several years before. That was the time President Kennedy was about to blow humanity off the face of the earth because Russian ships were on their way to liberated territory with arms for the people of Cuba. The Progressive Labor Party was holding a rally outside Oakland City College to encourage support for Fidel Castro, and I was there because I agreed with their views. There were a number of speakers, and one of them, Donald Warden, launched into a lengthy praise of Fidel. He did this in his usual opportunistic way, tooting his own horn. Warden was about halfway through his routine, criticizing civil rights organizations and asking why we put our money into that kind of thing, when Bobby challenged him, expressing opposition to Warden and strong support for the position of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He felt that the NAACP was the hope of black people, and because of this, he supported the government and its moves against Cuba. I explained to him afterward that he was wrong to support the government and the civil rights organizations. Too much money had already been put into legal actions. There were enough laws on the books to permit black people to deal with all their problems, but the laws were not enforced. Therefore, trying to get more laws was only a meaningless diversion from the real issues. This was an argument I had heard in the Afro-American Association and in Oakland by Malcolm X, who made the point over and over again. Bobby began to think about this and later came over to my point of view. Whatever our early disagreements, Bobby and I were close by 1965. Later, I recruited him into the Afro-American Association, but when I left it, he continued to stick with Warden. At that time, I was still going through my identity crisis, looking for some understanding of myself in relation to society. While I took a back seat in the association and refused to make a stand on any position, Bobby threw all his energy into it, even after I left. Still, we did not establish close contact until I got out of the hole in 1965. At that point, Bobby was planning to get married, and he needed a bed for his new apartment. I was breaking up with my girlfriend and had a bed I no longer wanted. I sold it to him, and we hauled it to his home. That afternoon, we began to talk. He told me that he also had left the Afro-American Association to hook up with Ken Freeman and his group, the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM. Most of the brothers in this group attended Oakland City College, but the organization was a sort of underground, off-campus operation. They also had a front group called Seoul Students Advisory Council, which was a recognized campus organization. The RAM group was more intellectual than active. They did a lot of talking about the revolution and also some writing. Writing was almost a requirement for membership, in fact, but Bobby was no writer. At the time I got out of jail, Bobby had been involved in an argument with the members and had been suspended for a time. Still angry about this, he told me he intended to break with them. Like me, like thousands of us, Bobby was looking for something and not finding it. Bobby and I entered a period of intense exploration, trying to solve some of the ideological problems of the Black movement. Partly, we needed to explain to our own satisfaction why no Black political organization had succeeded. The only one we thought had promised long-term success was the Organization of Afro-American Unity, started by Malcolm X. But Malcolm had died too soon to pull his program together. Malcolm's slogan had been, "Freedom by any means necessary," but nothing we saw was taking us there. We still had only a vague conception of what freedom ought to mean to Black people, except in abstract terms borrowed from politicians, and that did not help the people on the block at all. Those lofty words were meant for intellectuals and the bourgeoisie, who were already fairly comfortable. Much of our conversation revolved around groups in the San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley areas. Knowing the people who belonged to them, we could evaluate both positive and negative aspects of their characters and the nature of their organizations. While we respected many of the moves these brothers had made, we felt that the negative aspects of their movements overshadowed the positive ones. We started throwing around ideas. None of the groups were able to recruit and involve the very people they professed to represent. The poor people in the community who never went to college, probably were not even able to finish high school. Yet these were our people. They were the vast majority of the Black population in the area. Any group talking about Blacks was in fact talking about those low on the ladder in terms of well-being, self-respect, and the amount of concern the government had for them. All of us were talking, and nobody was reaching them. Bobby had a talent that could help us.
Yo, no shots at nobody, but I hope a lot of the young activists and the young university students who are studying a lot of law and getting into a lot of activism within, the next couple of years, just do me a favor. Listen to this section of the book because there's really a big disconnect between the intellectuals and the communities. We're not meeting people on the same level and the same frequencies. It's causing a lot of chaos amongst the community that's keeping us more divided than united. So please, this is no shot at nobody, but these are the key points that our elders and our ancestors already went through, so we don't have to keep repeating it. Just stop nitpicking at the sections of history that you want to be able to use to be able to highlight your section or whatever you're trying to, and listen to the entire context, man. We've been going through the same struggle even today.
To make a name for himself in local productions as an actor and comedian. I had seen him act in several plays written by brothers, and he was terrific. I had never liked comedians, and I would not go out of my way to hear one. If a person presents his material in a serious way and uses humor to get his points across, he will have me laughing with all the rest. But stand-up, wisecracking comedians leave me cold. Still, I recognized Bobby's talent, and I thought he could use it to relate to people and persuade them in an incisive way.
Really quick, for everybody on TikTok, we are also live on YouTube. So if you want to go over there and just subscribe and be able to recap some of the portions of the live that you missed, and want to go over some of the other books that we already have up there and that we are going to contribute, just do me a favor, go switch over to YouTube, go subscribe, hit the notification bells, and show some love. Salute to everybody tapping in this afternoon.
Often, when we were rapping about our frustrations with particular people or groups, Bobby would act out their madness. He could do expert imitations of President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, and Chester of Gunsmoke. He could also imitate down to the last detail some of the brothers around us. I would crack my sides laughing, not only because his imitations were so good, but because he could convey certain attitudes and characteristics so sharply. He caught all their shortcomings, the way their ideas failed to meet the needs of the people. We planned to work through the Soul Students Advisory Council. Although SSAC was just a front for RAM, it had one large advantage. It was not an intellectual organization, and for that reason, it would appeal to many lower-class brothers at City College. If these brothers belonged to a group that gave them feelings of strength and respect, they could become effective participants. It was important to give them something relevant to do, something not degrading. Soul Students was normally an ineffective and transitory group without a real program. Only if something big was happening did their meetings attract a lot of people. In the quiet times, only 2 or 3 would show up.
Let's tap the screen, guys. Let's tap
Just
it up.
then, however, Soul Students had a hot issue: the establishment of a program of Afro-American history and culture in the college's regular curriculum. Although it was a relevant program, the authorities were resisting it tooth and nail. Every time we proposed a new course, they countered with reasons why it could not be.
Thank you.
At the same time, ironically, they encouraged us to be concerned. This was simple trickery. They were dragging their feet. Bobby and I saw this as an opportunity to move Soul Students a step further by adopting a program of armed self-defense. We approached them, proposing a rally in front of the college in support of the Afro-American History program. We pointed out that this would be a different kind of rally. The Soul Student members would strap on guns and march on the sidewalk in front of the school. Partly, the rally would express our opposition to police brutality, but it would also intimidate the authorities at City College who were resisting our program. We were looking for a way to emphasize both college and community, to draw them in together. The police and the school authorities needed a strong jolt from blacks, and we knew this kind of action would make them realize that the brothers meant business. Carrying guns for self-defense was perfectly legal at the time. We explained all this to Soul Students and showed them that we did not intend to break any laws, but were concerned that the organization start dealing with reality rather than sit around intellectualizing and writing essays about the white man. We wanted them to dedicate themselves to armed self-defense, with the full understanding that this was defense for the survival of Black people in general, and in particular for the cultural program we were trying to establish. As we saw it, Blacks were getting ripped off everywhere. The police had given us no choice but to defend ourselves against their brutality. On the campus, we were being miseducated. We had no courses dealing with our real needs and problems, courses that taught us how to survive. Our program was designed to lead the brothers into self-defense before we were completely wiped out physically and mentally. The weapons were a recruiting device. I felt we could recruit Oakland City College students from the grassroots, people who did not relate to campus organizations, that were all too intellectual and offered no effective program of action.
Listen.
Street people would relate to soul students if they followed our plan. If the Black community has learned to respect anything, it has learned to respect the gun. We underestimated the difficulty of bringing the brothers around. Soul students completely rejected our program. Those brothers had been so intimidated by police firepower, they would not give any serious consideration to strapping on a gun, legal or not. After that setback, we went to the Revolutionary Action Movement. They did not have many members, just a few guys from the college campus who talked a lot. We explained that by wearing and displaying weapons on the street, brothers would relate to RAM's example of leadership. We also talked about a new idea, patrolling the police, since the police were the main perpetrators of violence against the community. We went no further than those two tactics: armed self-defense and police patrol. A more complete program was sure to get bogged down on minor points. I just wanted them to adopt a program of self-defense, and after that was worked out, we could then develop it more fully. We were not aiming then at party organization. There were too many organizations already. Our job was to make one of them relevant. That would be contribution enough. However, we were having a lot of trouble breaking through. RAM rejected the plan too. They thought it was suicidal, that we could not survive a single day patrolling the police. This left us where we had been all along. Nowhere. The founding of the Black Panther Party.
Salute to everybody tapping in
All
with
during
me.
this time,
Salute everybody tapping in with me. My bad, I thought I pressed pause. But if you on TikTok, just do me a favor. For any odd reason this live gets clipped, I will be still continuing the live stream on YouTube. So if you want to shoot over there and look me up and hit the notification and go subscribe, do me a favor. I will appreciate all the love and support, because I don't want TikTok to be able to limit the context, I can't even get the word out right now. The videos and the education that I'm trying to bring out to the this platform. So if you guys could do me a favor and go do me and support and subscribe and like, comment, share, please do me that favor. And I don't know why I got so tongue tied just now. I couldn't even say content. I couldn't say content just now, guys. Tap the screen, share this live.
and I had no thought of the Black Panther Party, no plan to head up an organization, and the 10-point program was still in the future. We had seen Watts rise up the previous year. We had seen how the police attacked the Watts community after causing the trouble in the first place. We had seen Martin Luther King come to Watts in an effort to calm the people, and we had seen his philosophy of nonviolence rejected. Black people had been taught nonviolence. It was deep in us. What good, however, was nonviolence when the police were determined to rule by force? We had seen the Oakland Police and the California Highway Patrol begin to carry their shotguns in full view as another way of striking fear into the community. We had seen all this, and we recognized that the rising consciousness of Black people was almost at the point of explosion. One must relate to the history of one's community and to its future. Everything we had seen convinced us that our time had come. Out of this need sprang the Black Panther Party. Bobby and I finally had no choice but to form an organization that would involve the lower class brothers. We worked it out in conversations and discussions. Most of the talk was casual.
And this is what a lot of people don't understand with the succession of the Black Panthers. It wasn't the fact that they just recruited intellectuals. It's the fact that they recruited everyone within the black community that was willing to fight and willing to learn and willing to be educated, that's willing to stand for something. They didn't discriminate within the community, guys. And this is what we gotta, really understand, because I think we have that superiority complex that we feel like we know more than others and we feel like they're not worthy enough, not understanding that everybody has a tool. Everybody has a skill that they can contribute to the movement. So we can't count people out just because we don't think they intellectually, capable or to even, stand on the same level as one another. We got to stop that shit. I'm telling you, we got to stop it. And this was to the success of the Black Panther Party, of the Young Lords, of the Brown Berets. This is why I say we got to look at the grassroots movements, the ones that started at the bottoms, with the people. The other movements are dope, but you got to understand, our greatest accomplishments is when we came together as oppressed people, not just individuals who are on the same frequency level. No, we're never going to be successful. Like I said, we all got different skills, different tools that we able to contribute. One thing we missing is a plan.
Bobby lived near the campus, and his living room became a kind of headquarters. Although we were still involved with Soul students, we attended few meetings, and when we did go, our presence was mostly disruptive. We raised questions that upset people. Our conversations with each other became the important thing. Brothers who had a free hour between classes and others who just hung around the campus drifted in and out of Bobby's house. We drank beer and wine and chewed over the political situation, our social problems, and the merits and shortcomings of the other groups. We also discussed the Black achievements of the past, particularly as they helped us to understand current events. In a sense, these sessions...
And that goes for everybody. We need to start doing that. We need to start looking at the events of the past so we could really start understanding how we in the situations that we are today. We got to look at the situations and the decision making that a lot of our elders, a lot of our revolutionaries, a lot of our people have made to not be able to reenact a lot of the shit that they fucking assimilated or got forced to, or whatever the situation or case may be. Sometimes you got people who are sellouts. You got sometimes people who are put in certain situations and circumstances that they have no choice. But without understanding that, we're not going to be able to avoid it. So that's what I got to say about that.
Bobby's house were our political education classes, and the party sort of grew out of them. Even after we formally organized, we continued the discussions in our office. By then, we had moved on to include not only problems, but possible solutions.
And that's my thing. F1, what I'm about to say. I believe political education should be an environment to have individuals to be able to share knowledge and information, even go back and forth and debate a little bit, because again, that's how you get the most intense information, a lot of knowledge, and how do you get people to really think outside the box, right? But I don't think it helps when we intellectually masturbate and we allow that to have this superiority complex. That's the stuff that really hurts us and hinders us to be able to get the message out to our people. We got to understand our people have been through so much and been through so many different things, and have a lot of individuals coming to them trying to preach and guide them down a certain direction, that we don't receive shit like that well. So we have to be able to reach each other on the level that one another fully understands. It's not a competition.
We also read. The literature of oppressed people and their struggles for liberation in other countries is very large. And we
listen to what he's saying. I'm going to go back 30 seconds because I paused it, but this is what I need everybody to understand.
After we formally organized, we continued the discussions in our office. By then, we had moved on to include not only problems, but possible solutions. We also read. The literature of oppressed people and their struggles for liberation in other countries is very large, and we pored over these books to see how their experiences might help us to understand our plight. We read the work of Frantz Fanon, particularly The Wretched of the Earth, the 4 volumes of Chairman Mao Zedong, and Che Guevara's Guerrilla Warfare. Che and Mao were veterans of people's wars, and they had worked out successful strategies for liberating their people. We read these men's works because we saw them as kinsmen. The oppressor who had controlled them was controlling us, both directly and indirectly. We believed it was necessary to know how they gained their freedom in order to go about getting ours. However, we did not want to merely import ideas and strategies. We had to transform what we learned into principles and methods acceptable to the brothers on the block. Mao and Fanon and Guevara all saw clearly that the people had been stripped of their birthright and their dignity, not by any philosophy or mere words, but at gunpoint. They had suffered a hold-up by gangsters and rape. For them, the only way to win freedom was to meet force with force.
And again, this is why I say I love philosophy and ideology, but what even what these philosophers preach is don't take their philosophies and dogmat it, right? To be able to take what you need and leave the rest, to be able to apply the things that'll be able to work amongst your community and your people and apply those things and develop it and create it in a way where it's successful for you and yours, not to emulate something that may or may not be effective towards your people because it may or may not be able to be the same circumstances. This is the important part of philosophy. Take it, apply it to how you need, and evolve it. We're evolving people. Why don't we evolve the philosophies and ideology which is passed down and apply it to us in a more modernized fashion that actually works?
Bottom. This is a form of self-defense. Although that defense might at times take on characteristics of aggression, in the final analysis, the people do not initiate. They simply respond to what has been inflicted upon them. People respect the expression of strength and dignity displayed by men who refuse to bow to the weapons of oppression. Though it may mean death, these men will fight, because death with dignity is preferable to ignominy. Then, too, there is always the chance that the oppressor will be overwhelmed. Fanon made a statement during the Algerian War that impressed me. He said it was the year of the boomerang, which is the 3rd phase of violence. At that point, the violence of the aggressor turns on him and strikes a killing blow. Yet the oppressor does not understand the process. He knows no more than he did in the 1st phase when he launched the violence. The oppressed are always defensive. The oppressor is always aggressive and surprised when the people turn back on him the force he has used against them.
Listen.
Negroes with Guns by Robert Williams had a great influence on the kind of party we developed. Williams had been active in Monroe, North Carolina, with a program of armed self-defense that had enlisted many in the community. However, I did not like the way he had called on the federal government for assistance. We viewed the government as an enemy, the agency of a ruling clique that controls the country. We also had some literature about the Deacons for Defense and Justice in Louisiana, the state where I was born. One of their leaders had come through the Bay Area on a speaking and fundraising tour, and we liked what he said. The Deacons had done a good job of defending civil rights marchers in their area, but they also had a habit of calling upon the federal government to carry out this defense, or at least to assist them in defending the people who were upholding the law. The Deacons even went so far as to enlist local sheriffs and police to defend the marchers, with the threat that if law enforcement agencies would not defend them, the Deacons would. We also viewed the local police, the National Guard, and the regular military as one huge armed group that opposed the will of the people. In a boundary situation, people have no real defense except what they provide for themselves. We read also the works of the freedom fighters who had done so much for black communities in the United States. Bobby had collected all of Malcolm X's speeches and ideas from papers like The Militant and Muhammad Speaks. These we studied carefully. Although Malcolm's program for the organization of Afro-American unity was never put into operation, he has made it clear that blacks ought to arm. Malcolm's influence was ever present. We continue to believe that the Black Panther Party exists in the spirit of Malcolm.
The fun fact that the Young Lords and the Black Panther Party consider themselves children of Malcolm. And that's how much they embedded a lot of his philosophy and ideology into their own. You know, they took what they needed and left the rest. You know, they didn't implement a lot of the religious components of it. But as far as uplifting and, you know, showing how to struggle together and fight together and, you know, how to unify the community and so on and so forth, they took a lot of his literature and they used a lot of it and implemented a lot of it into their philosophies and ideologies, especially in a day and age after the assassination of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. You have a very rebellious society right now that's very angry and very, you know, mad at what's going on and wants to be able to change the situation and circumstances by any means off of the philosophies and ideology of individuals like Malcolm X. Again, at this point, you got to realize that a lot of people are really fed up with this shit. Not saying that they wasn't fed up with it before, but it's breaking out of that psychological aspect and really seeing the capabilities and the things you can and cannot do and what things that may or may not disrupt or, you know, mess up the system that you're trying to get proper representation through. So again, we got to understand the circumstances, the times, and we also got to understand too, when judging and critiquing and understanding, you know, historical events, we cannot apply today's judgment on yesterday's circumstances. Back then, what was considered okay was not considered, is definitely not considered okay today. But to understanding the situations and dynamics and watching how society grows and develops, it's a beautiful thing because this is how we got to where we're at today. So we got to look at history from all sides and all parts of the aspects that we really consume in this knowledge and education.
Often it is difficult to say exactly how an action or a program has been determined or influenced in a spiritual way. Such intangibles are hard to describe, although they can be more significant than any precise influence. Therefore, the words on this page cannot convey the effect that Malcolm has had on the Black Panther Party, although, as far as I am concerned, the party is a living testament to his life work.
Listen.
I do not claim that the party has done what Malcolm would have done. Many others say that their programs are Malcolm's programs. We do not say this, but Malcolm's spirit is in us. From all of these things, the books, Malcolm's writings and spirit, our analysis of the local situation, the idea of an organization was forming. One day, quite suddenly, almost by chance, we found a name. I had read a pamphlet about voter registration in Mississippi, how the people in Lowndes County had armed themselves against establishment violence. Their political group, called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, had a Black Panther for its symbol. A few days later, while Bobby and I were rapping, I suggested that we use the panther as our symbol and call our political vehicle the Black Panther Party. The panther is a fierce animal, but he will not attack until he is backed into a corner. Then he will strike out. The image seemed appropriate, and Bobby agreed without discussion. At this point, we knew it was time to stop talking and begin organizing. Although we had always wanted to get away from the intellectualizing and rhetoric characteristic of other groups, at times we were as inactive as they were. The time had come for action.
And this is the stuff that I talk about, especially one organizing today. A lot of us glorify the past and not really taking the past for what it needs to be taken for today. And it's to be able to take the lessons that we learn, whether good, bad, or ugly, to not be able to repeat them again. They set the foundations and the stepping stones. And what we trying to do is reinvent the fucking wheel to fit our narrative. And we have to stop that. We're erasing all the efforts and all the work and all the accomplishments they've accomplished when we do so. This is why I say we have to understand. Even when he's talking about understanding geopolitical issues, don't let that shit go over your head, because that's a prime key of the components of what was the success to the Black Panther Party. Why? International recognition, having China open up the doors, having talks with Russia, doing it. It goes. My bad, guys. I got a phone call. My bad. But like I said, it goes to a lot of aspects when you talk about the revolution, right? You gotta be able to understand the intersectionalities between, nations, peoples, and struggles to be able to really understand the full dynamics of what the revolution consists of and how it got from point A to point B. These are huge. But let's keep tapping that screen, keep sharing this live. Again, we are live on YouTube and TikTok, so if you guys want to follow me on both platforms, it is the same name, AfroTaino88. And if you want to do me a favor, just shoot over to YouTube really quick. Go hit subscribe and the notification bells, because again, a lot of the books that I bring on this platform gets me put on timeout, especially when you talk about revolutionary times, or you going over, individuals that we look up to, such as Huey P and their personal thoughts and, their ideologies, and it might be taken out of context. Oh, hold on. Again, I keep getting a phone call. But let's keep going, guys. Tap that screen and share this live.
Patrolling. It was the spring of 1966. Still without a definite program, we were at the stage of testing ideas that would capture the imagination of the community. We began, as always, by checking around with the Street Brothers. We asked them if they would be interested in forming the Black Panther Party for self-defense, which would be based upon defending the community against the aggression of the power structure, including the military and the armed might of the police. We informed the brothers of their right to possess weapons. Most of them were interested. Then we talked about how the people are constantly intimidated by arrogant, belligerent police officers, and exactly what we could do about it.
And I'm not crazy, guys. If I'm pointing up, it's because the Huey P. Newton book is literally green screen right here. So if you guys on TikTok, on YouTube, see me pointing up, it's because it's there. And on YouTube, the book is right here. So if you guys see me pointing here and y'all like what he's pointing at, is because I'm on two platforms and the book is in two different positions. Tap that screen, share this live. Salute to everybody. Let's keep this knowledge and education flowing and building. Let's keep positive vibrations. If you're enjoying this book on both platforms, just throw some book emojis in the comments and throw some heart emojis to be able to, shake up the algorithm and to be able to get more people into here. But I salute everybody. Peace, blessings, positivity. Let's get back into it.
Pool halls and bars, all the places where brothers congregate and talk. I was prepared to give them legal advice. From my law courses at Oakland City College and San Francisco Law School, I was familiar with the California Penal Code and well versed in the laws relating to weapons. I also had something very important at my disposal: the law library of the North Oakland Service Center, a community center poverty program where Bobby was working. The center gave legal advice, and there were many law books on the shelves. Unfortunately, most of them dealt with civil law, since the anti-poverty program was not supposed to advise poor people about criminal law. However, I made good use of the books they had to run down the full legal situation to the brothers on the street. We were doing what the poverty program claimed to be doing but never had: giving help and counsel to poor people about the things that crucially affected their lives. All that summer, we circulated in the Black communities of Richmond, Berkeley, Oakland, and San Francisco. Wherever brothers gathered, we talked with them about their right to arm. In general, they were interested but skeptical about the weapons idea. They could not see anyone walking around with a gun in full view. To recruit any sizable number of street brothers, we would obviously have to do more than talk. We needed to give practical applications of our theory, show them that we were not afraid of weapons and not afraid of death. The way we finally won the brothers over was by patrolling the police with arms. Before we began the patrols, however, Bobby and I set down in writing a practical course of action. We could go no further without a program, and we resolved to drop everything else, even though it might take a while to come up with something viable. One day, we went to the North Oakland Service Center to work it out. The center was an ideal place because of the books and the fact that we could work undisturbed. First, we pulled together all the books we had been reading and dozens we had only heard about. We discussed Mao's program, Cuba's program, and all the others, but concluded that we could not follow any of them. Our unique situation required a unique program. Although the relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed is universal, forms of oppression vary. The ideas that mobilized the people of Cuba and China sprang from their own history and political structures.
And again, so y'all don't be thinking that I be trying to burst a lot of modern day activists or revolutionaries' bubble. But you hearing Huey say it himself. You hearing, and this is what confuses me with a lot of individuals today, especially these modern day activists, right? Is that they really take that knowledge and information. I know it's exciting because you're learning something new and it's inspiring. I get it. But don't you read the full context of the text? Do you not realize they even tell you themselves? Take what you need and leave the rest. But some of us are so hungry for certain knowledge and power that we overlook certain aspects of what these philosophers or these leaders are trying to convey to the masses. We start creating this elitism amongst the people that are at the bottoms. It don't make no sense.
Parts of those programs could be carried out only under a certain kind of oppression. Our program had to deal with America. I started wrapping off the essential points for the survival of black and oppressed people in the United States. Bobby wrote them down, and then we separated those ideas into two sections: what we want and what we believe.
Listen.
We split them up because the ideas fell naturally into two distinct categories. It was necessary to explain why we wanted certain things. At the same time, our goals were based on beliefs, and we set those out too. In the section on beliefs, we made it clear that all the objective conditions necessary for attaining our goals were already in existence, but that a number of societal factors stood in our way. This was to help the people understand what was working against them. All in all, our 10-point program took about 20 minutes to write. Thinking it would take days, we were prepared for a long session. But we never got to the small mountain of books piled up around us. We had come to an important realization. Books could only point in a general direction. The rest was up to us. This is the program we wrote down. October 1966.
Tap that screen and share this live. I appreciate all the love and support. And again, get them pens and pads, and start jotting down some notes. And maybe we can start getting a little bit further in societal issues when we can start recognizing and understanding the messages that our elders and our founders have set before us. So let's keep it going. Tap that screen, share this live, and let's tune right back in.
Black Panther Party platform and program. What we want, what we believe. 1. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. We believe that black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. 2. We want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessman will not give full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. 3. We want an end to the robbery by the capitalist of our black community. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and now we are demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of black people. We will accept the payment and currency which will be distributed to our many communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of millions of black people. Therefore, we feel that this is a modest demand that we make. 4. We want decent housing, fit for shelter of human beings. We believe that if the white landlords will not give decent housing to our black community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our community, with government aid, can build and make decent housing for its people. 5. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present-day society. We believe...
Yeah, I appreciate all the love and support. Don't forget, do me a favor, go follow me on YouTube, AfroTaino88. So just in case you miss any of the portions or you want to go back and recap and listen to some of what we got going on, you can find me on YouTube at AfroTaino88. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and also the subscription. Everybody on TikTok, I appreciate all the love and support, and everybody on YouTube, vice versa. Shout out to everybody tapping in on both platforms.
Educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself and his position in society and the world, then he has little chance to relate to anything else. 6. We want all black men to be exempt from military service. We believe that black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend a racist government that does not protect us. We will not fight and kill other people of color in the world who, like black people, are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by whatever means necessary.
Listen up.
7. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. We believe we can end police brutality in our black community by organizing black self-defense groups that are dedicated to defending our black community from racist police oppression and brutality. The Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives a right to bear arms. We therefore believe that all black people should arm themselves for self-defense. 8. We want freedom for all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We believe that all black people should be released from the many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. 9. We want all black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group or people from their black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States.
And again, I just want to highlight, he's saying all black people. And again, at the beginning of this book, he recognizes the entire diaspora being someone of a product of the transatlantic slave trade. No matter where you are, he still sees you as the same person as he is, regardless of what language they speak, because they have the same history. You're talking to a very intelligent individual who understands historical context in its proper context. So this is why I say, please listen to our elders' words. Pay attention to what they're saying. These are individuals who use specific words for specific reasons. So please, intent is everything. Tap the screen, share this live. This is why the philosophies and ideologies of the Black Panther Party went everywhere. Because it is something that resonates with all oppressed people, especially the diaspora.
We believe that the courts should follow the United States Constitution so that black people will receive fair trials. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives a man a right to be tried by his peer group. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the black community from which the black defendant came. We have been and are being tried by all white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning man of the black community. 10. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And as our major political objective, a United Nations supervised plebiscite to be held throughout the Black colony in which only Black colonial subjects will be allowed to participate, for the purpose of determining the will of Black people as to their national destiny. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume, among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among them, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. With the program on paper, we set up the structure of our organization. Bobby became chairman, and I chose the position of Minister of Defense. I was very happy with this arrangement. I do not like to lead formally, and the chairman has to conduct meetings and be involved in administration. We also discussed having an advisory cabinet as an information arm of the party. We wanted this cabinet to do research on each of the 10 points and their relation to the community, and to advise the people on how to implement them. It seemed best to weight the political wing of the party with street brothers and the advisory cabinet with middle-class blacks who had the necessary knowledge and skills. We were also seeking a functional unity between middle-class blacks and the street brothers. I asked my brother Melvin to approach a few friends about serving on the advisory cabinet, but when our plan became clear, they all refused, and the cabinet was deferred. The first member of the Black Panther Party, after Bobby and myself, was Little Bobby Hutton. Little Bobby had met Bobby Seale at the North Oakland Service Center, where both were working, and he immediately became enthusiastic about the nascent organization. Even though he was only about 15 years old then, he was a responsible and mature person, determined to help the cause of Black people. He became the party's first treasurer. Little Bobby was the youngest of 7 children. His family had come to Oakland from Arkansas when he was 3 years old. His parents were good, hard-working people, but Bobby had endured the same hardships and humiliations to which so many young blacks in poor communities are subjected. Like many of the brothers, he had been kicked out of school. Then he had gotten an apartment and a job at the service center. After work, he used to come around to Bobby Seale's house to talk and learn to read. At the time of his murder, he was reading Black Reconstruction in America by W.E.B. Du Bois. Bobby was a serious revolutionary, but there was nothing grim about him. He had an infectious smile and a disarming quality that made people love him. He died courageously, the first Black Panther to make the supreme sacrifice for the people. We all attempt to carry on the work he began. We started now to implement our 10-point program. Interested primarily in educating and revolutionizing the community, we needed to get their attention and give them something to identify with. This is why the 7th point, police action, was the first program we emphasized. Point 7 stated, "We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people." This is a major issue in every black community. The police have never been our protectors. Instead, they act as the military arm of our oppressors and continually brutalize us. Many communities have tried and failed to get civilian review boards to supervise the behavior of the police. In some places, organized citizen patrols have followed the police and observed them in their community dealings. They take pictures and make tape recordings of the encounters and report misbehavior to the authorities. However, the authorities responsible for overseeing the police are policemen themselves and usually side against the citizens. We recognized that it was ridiculous to report the police to the police, but we hoped that by raising encounters to a higher level, by patrolling the police with arms, we would see a change in their behavior. Further, the community would notice this and become interested in the party. Thus, our armed patrols were also a means of recruiting. At first, the patrols were a total success. Frightened and confused, the police did not know how to respond because they had never encountered patrols like this before. They were familiar with the community alert patrols in other cities, but never before had guns been an integral part of any patrol program. With weapons in our hands, we were no longer their subjects, but their equals. Out on patrol, we stopped whenever we saw the police questioning a brother or a sister. We would walk over with our weapons and observe them from a safe distance so that the police could not say we were interfering with the performance of their duty. We would ask the community members if they were being abused. Most of the time when a policeman saw us coming, he slipped his book back into his pocket, got into his car, and left in a hurry. The citizens who had been stopped were as amazed as the police at our sudden appearance. I always carried law books in my car. Sometimes, when a policeman was harassing a citizen, I would stand off a little and read the relevant portions of the penal code in a loud voice to all within hearing distance. In doing this, we were helping to educate those who gathered to observe these incidents. If the policeman arrested the citizen and took him to the station, we would follow and immediately post bail. Many community people could not believe at first that we had only their interest at heart. Nobody had ever given them any support or assistance when the police harassed them. But here we were, proud black men, armed with guns and a knowledge of the law.
Really quick, everybody tapping in. Don't forget we're also live on YouTube, so if you want to go back and listen to some of the context or some of the books, or even look at some of the other books we've gone over, it is on AfroTaino 88. So if you guys want to go over there, shoot me a subscribe and hit the notification bell so that way you don't miss anything. Whether TikTok decides to put me on timeout or not, you'll still be able to find the context that I'm putting out there. So tap that screen, share this live, and let's keep it going.
Came right out of jail and into the party, and the statistics of murder and brutality by policemen in our communities fell sharply. Each day we went out on our watch. Sometimes we got on a policeman's tail and followed him with our weapons in full view. If he darted around the block or made a U-turn trying to follow us, we let him do it until he got tired of that. Then we would follow him again. Either way, we took up a good bit of police time that otherwise would have been spent in harassment.
Right.
As our forces built up, we doubled the patrols, then tripled them.
Listen.
We began to patrol everywhere: Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley, and San Francisco. Most patrols were a part of our normal movement around the community. We kept them random, however, so that the police could not set a network to anticipate us.
Listen up.
They never knew when or where we were going to show up.
You can't be predictable, but you got to continue to apply the pressure.
Late at night or early in the morning. Some brothers would go on patrol the same time every day, but never in a specific pattern or in the same geographical area. The chief purpose of the patrols was to teach the community security against the police, and we did not need a regular schedule for that. We knew that no particular area could be totally defended, Only the community could effectively defend and eventually liberate itself.
Listen.
Our aim was simply to teach them how to go about it. We passed out our literature.
Because people learn by observation and participation. It don't matter if you keep drilling it to their head. But if they don't learn by observation and participation, you're less likely to have people help you or participate, even if it's something that they want to be able to change. If they do not see something, they don't believe in something. Hence why a lot of us don't understand the importance of having representation throughout history, because if you don't see yourself in history, you don't believe you can be anything more than what history portrays you to be.
And 10-point program to the citizens who gathered, discussed community defense, and educated them about their rights concerning weapons. All along, the number of members grew. The Black Panthers were and are always required to keep their activities within legal bounds. This was emphasized repeatedly in our political education classes and also when we taught weapons care.
And this is the misnomer when they put out the propaganda that they put out, perpetuating that the Black Panthers or any other movement that grew out of the United States, especially out of oppression and systematic failures, you know, they label them as T-words. So this is why it's very important to understand, too, how it's not just doing because you want to do. Why? Because if you do just to do and you want to be reactionary every time, you're putting your people in a situation and circumstances where people can get hurt. This is why you have to understand the concept of maximum damage, minimum loss to life. We've already lost too many things, too many people, too many family members, too many ancestors off of reactionary bullshit. And this is what we fall victim to every day, even today. We have to stop that.
Overstepped legal bounds, the police would easily gain the upper hand and be able to continue their intimidation. We also knew the community was somewhat fearful of the gun and of the policeman who had it. So we studied the law about weapons and kept within our rights. To be arrested for having weapons would be a setback to our program of teaching the people their constitutional right to bear arms. As long as we kept everything legal, the police could do nothing, and the people would see that armed defense was a legitimate constitutional right.
You challenge the judicial system with the foundation that it's laid down itself. We have to learn to be able to use the tools of the oppressor against the oppressor.
This way, they would lose their doubts and fears and be able to move against their oppressor. It was not all observation and penal code reading on those patrols. The police, invariably shocked to meet a cadre of disciplined and armed black men coming to the support of the community, reacted in strange and unpredictable ways. In their fright, some of them became children, cursing and insulting us. We responded in kind, calling them swine and pigs, but never cursing. This could be cause for arrest. And we took care not to be arrested with our weapons. But we demonstrated their cowardice to the community with our shakabuku. It was sometimes hilarious to see their reaction. They had always been cocky and sure of themselves as long as they had weapons to intimidate the unarmed community. When we equalized the situation, their real cowardice was exposed. Soon they began to retaliate. We expected this. They had to get back at us in some way, and were prepared.
Reactionary, right? Now you're going to see the police being reactionary instead of really trying to understand the situation and dynamics. Now them being reactionary is only going to lead to what? More intense and more crucial conditions. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Even after they do what they do, you're going to see the reaction, right? For every action is an opposite and equal reaction. Understanding and identifying these different components helps us understand the situation and dynamics of back then that leads into today.
That we had conquered our fear of death made it possible to face them under any circumstances. The police began to keep a record of Black Panther vehicles. When they spotted one, it would be stopped and investigated for possible violations.
And again, we're gonna break down to the police investigations, the COINTELPRO, the FBI, and again, what happened prior to this. Maybe a couple of years, give or take, 10 to 15 years. They was mastering the carpetas, right? The COINTELPRO files or the tactics that they were evolving and developing into the tactics that they used against the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and every other revolutionary movement out there. So this is why I say the intersectionality between history and how one thing crosses over and how one thing needs to evolve and develop, especially if you're gonna master the tactics to be able to use it on different groups of people.
This was a childish ploy, but it was the police way. We always made sure our vehicles were clean, without violations, and the police were usually hard-pressed to find any justification for stopping us.
Because if you don't have justification, it doesn't stand up in court, proving to the people that you guys can't just do whatever the fuck you want to do.
Since we were within the law, they soon resorted to illegal tactics. I was stopped and questioned 40 or 50 times by police without being arrested, or even getting a ticket in most instances. The few times I did end up on the blotter, it merely proved how far they were willing to go. A policeman once stopped me and examined my license and the car for any violation of the motor vehicle code. He spent about half an hour going over the vehicle, checking lights, horn, tires, everything. Finally, he shook the rear license plate and a bolt dropped off, so he wrote out a ticket for a faulty license plate. Some encounters with the police were more dramatic. At times, they drew their guns and we drew ours, until we reached a sort of standoff. This happened frequently to me. I often felt that someday one of the police would go crazy and pull the trigger. Some of them were so nervous that they looked as if they might shake a bullet out of their pistols. I would rather have a brave man pull a gun on me, since he is less likely to panic. But we were prepared for anything. Sometimes they threatened to shoot, thinking I would lose courage. But I remembered the lessons of solitary confinement and assigned every silly action its proper significance. They were afraid of us. It was as simple as that. Each day we went forth fully aware that we might not come home or see each other ever again. There is no closeness to equal that. In front of our first Black Panther office on 58th Street in Oakland, a policeman once drew his gun and pointed it at me while I sat in my car. When people gathered to observe, the police told them to clear the area. I ignored the gun, got out of the car, and asked the people to go into the party office. They had a right to observe the police. Then I called the policeman an ignorant Georgia cracker who had come west to get away from sharecropping.
F1 in the comments, F1 in the comments. Let's keep tapping that screen and sharing this live. F1, and let's get those taps up to be able to keep this a safe live.
I walked around the car and spoke to the citizens about the police and about every man's right to be armed. I took a chance there, but I figured the policeman would not shoot me with all those eyes on him. He was willing to shoot me without cause, I am sure, but not before so many witnesses.
So you thought?
Another policeman admitted as much during an incident in Richmond. I had stopped to watch a motorcycle cop question a citizen. He was clearly edgy at my presence, but I stood off quietly at a reasonable distance with my shotgun in hand. After writing up the citizen, he rode his motorcycle over to me and asked if I wanted to press charges for police brutality. About a dozen people were standing around watching us. "Are you paranoid?" I replied. "Do you think you're important? Do you think I would waste my time going down to the police station to make a report on you? No, you're just a coward anyway." With that, I got into my car. When he tried to hold my door open, I slammed it shut and told him to get his hands off. By now, people were laughing at the cop, and rather than suffer further humiliation, he drove off, steaming mad. About halfway down the street, he turned around and came back. He wanted to do something, and he was about 50 shades of red. Pulling up beside me, he stuck his head close and said, "If it was night, you wouldn't do this." "You're right," I replied. "I sure wouldn't, but you're threatening me now, aren't you?" He got a little redder and kicked his machine into gear and took off. The police wanted me badly, but they needed to do their dirty work out of view of the community. When a citizen was unarmed, they brutalized him anytime, almost casually. But when he was prepared to defend himself, the police became little more than criminals, working at night. On another occasion, I stopped by the Black Panther office after paying some bills for my father. Since I was taking care of family business, I had not carried my shotgun with me. It was at home, but I did have a dagger, fully sheathed, in my belt. In the office were two comrades, Warren Tucker, a captain in the party, and another member. As we talked, an 11-year-old boy burst into the office and said, "The police are at my friend's house and they're tearing up the place." This house was only about 3 blocks away, so the two Black Panthers and I hurried to the scene. Warren Tucker had a .45 pistol strapped to his hip in full view, but the other two of us had no weapons. We never kept weapons in the office, since we were there only periodically. When we arrived, we found 3 policemen in the house, turning over couches and chairs, searching and pushing the little boy around and shouting, "Where's the shotgun?" The boy kept saying, "I don't have a shotgun," but the police went right on looking.
Listen.
I asked the policeman who seemed to be in charge if he had a search warrant, and he answered that he did not need one because he was in hot pursuit. Then he told me to leave the house. The little boy asked me to stay, so I continued to question the police, telling them they had no right to be there. The policeman finally turned on me. "You're going to get out of here," he said. In the middle of this argument, the boy's father arrived and also asked the police for a search warrant. When the police admitted they did not have one, he ordered them out. As they started to leave, one of the policemen stopped in the doorway and said to the father, "Why are you telling us to get out? Why don't you get rid of these Panthers? They're the troublemakers." The father replied, "Before this, I didn't like the Panthers. I had heard bad things about them, but in the last few minutes, I've changed my mind, because they helped my son when you pushed him around." The police became even more outraged at this. All their hostility now turned toward us. As the whole group went down the steps and out into the yard, more policemen arrived on the scene. The house was directly across the street from Oakland City College, and the dozen or so police cars had attracted a crowd that was milling about. The policeman who had been ordered out of the house took new courage at the sight of reinforcements. Walking over to me in the yard, he came close, saying, "You are always making trouble for us." Coming closer still, he growled at me in a low voice that could not be overheard, "You motherfucker." This was a regular police routine, a transparent strategy. He wanted me to curse him before witnesses, then he could arrest me. But I had learned to be cautious. After he called me a motherfucker, he stood waiting for the explosion. But it did not come in the way he expected. Instead, I called him a swine, a pig, a slimy snake, everything I could think of without using profanity. By now, he was almost apoplectic. "You're talking to me like that and you have a weapon. You're displaying a weapon in a rude and threatening fashion." Then he turned to Warren Tucker. Warren's gun was still in its holster, and said, "And so are you." As if on signal, the 15 policemen who had been standing around uncertainly stormed the 3 of us and threw on handcuffs. They did not say they were placing us under arrest. If they had, we would gladly have taken the arrest under the circumstances without any resistance. From the way we went hurtling off in the paddy wagon, with its siren wailing and police cars ahead and behind, you might have thought they had bagged a mafia capo. After we were booked, they searched us and found a penknife in Warren Tucker's pocket, the kind Boy Scouts use. So they dropped the charge of displaying a weapon in a rude and threatening manner, and charged him simply with carrying a concealed weapon. Even that charge was eventually dropped. This was the kind of harassment we went through over and over again, simply because we chose to exercise our constitutional rights to self-defense and stand up for the community. In spite of the fact that we followed the law to the letter, we were arrested and convicted of all sorts of minor trumped-up charges. They sought to frighten us and turn the community against us, but what they did had the opposite effect. For instance, after this encounter, we gained a number of new members from City College students who had watched the incident and had seen how things really were. They had been skeptical about us earlier because of the bad treatment we had received in the press, but seeing is believing. The policeman who started this particular incident testified against me in 1968 in my trial for killing a policeman. When my attorney, Charles Gary, questioned him under cross-examination, he admitted his fear of the Black Panthers. He is 6 feet tall and weighs 250 pounds. I am 5 feet 10.5 inches and weigh 150 pounds. Yet he said that I surrounded him. Straying further from the facts, he testified that he had not said anything to me, that, on the contrary, he was too frightened to open his mouth. The Black Panthers allegedly frightened him by shaking high-powered rifles in his face, calling him a pig, and threatening to kill him. He was fearful, he said, that I would kill him with the dagger, though it was sheathed. He stated that I had come right up to him, that I was in his face, and, as he put it, he was all around me. So much for police testimony. In addition to our patrols and confrontations with the police, I did a lot of recruiting in pool halls and bars, sometimes working 12 to 16 hours a day. I passed out leaflets with our 10-point program, explaining each point to all who would listen. Going deep into the community like this, I invariably became involved in whatever was happening. This day-to-day contact became an important part of our organizing effort. There is a bar restaurant in North Oakland known as the Bosson's Locker. I used to call it my office because I would sometimes sit in there for 20 hours straight talking with the people who came in. Most of the time I had my shotgun with me, if the owners of the establishment did not object. If they did, I left it in my car. At other times I would go to City College or to the Oakland Skills Center, anywhere people gathered. It was hard work, but not in the sense of working at any ordinary job, with its deadly routine and sense of futility in performing empty labor. It was work that had profound significance for me. The very meaning of my life was in it, and it brought me closer to the people. This recruiting had an interesting ramification, in that I tried to transform many of the so-called criminal activities going on in the street into something political, although this had to be done gradually. Instead of trying to eliminate these activities, numbers, hot goods, drugs, I attempted to channel them into significant community actions. Black consciousness had generally reached a point where a man felt guilty about exploiting the Black community. However, if his daily activities for survival could be integrated with actions that undermined the established order, he felt good about it. It gave him a feeling of justification and strengthened his own sense of personal worth. Many of the brothers who were burglarizing and participating in similar pursuits began to contribute weapons and material to community defense. In order to survive, they still had to sell their hot goods, but at the same time, they would pass some of the cash on to us. That way, ripping off became more than just an individual thing. Gradually, the Black Panthers came to be accepted in the Bay Area community. We had provided a needed example of strength and dignity by showing people how to defend themselves. More important, we lived among them. They could see every day that with us the people came first.
Ooh, that was an excellent beginning, especially for part 1 of the Huey P. Newton Reader. We about to end out the live, guys. We've been up here for a couple of hours. I want to say almost 2 hours. For those who are just joining, you guys missed some of the live. We are dual live on YouTube and TikTok, so you can actually go back and go recap and catch some of the content that you guys missed. So again, it's all up there for YouTube. The last book we did up there was the first book we did was War Against All Puerto Ricans, and now today we're starting the Huey P. Newton Reader. I did this so that way you guys who do miss my live and come every so often when you guys don't have or aren't busy and have spare time, I did it that way. So just in case you wanted to keep up with a specific book that you guys caught me, going over, you guys have access to that library. So So salute to everybody. Peace, blessings, positivity. We will pick this up tomorrow where we left off. And don't forget the Young Lords Back to Borinquen Project. All gifts and donations will be going to the Young Lords Back to Borinquen Project. We will be at the Marco Sanchez Community Center from October 5th or October 6th. I arrive on the 5th. October 6th to the 15th. So if you guys want to be able to help support the GoFundMe, the link is in the bio, and all gifts and donations will be going to the Young Lords Back to Borinquen Project. And if you guys want to donate to my Cash App, it's the same thing as my name, AfroTaino88, $ in the front. So salute to everybody. Peace, blessings, positivity, and I'm going to catch you guys later. I got to go end the live. 1. And this one out. Boom.